Hey everybody, I'm Jesse, and welcome to another edition of Gen X Thinks. And today I'm going to discuss the possibility that Generation X might be the worst grandparents ever. Now, I ran across this article. It's a online discussion going on, and I guess a bunch of the younger generation are complaining that about Gen X being horrible grandparents. And horrible is a subjective idea, of course. But I think more important question is that why are these younger people saying this, right? Because if you remember, or if you were a subscriber back then, I did a video about a conversation like this, that Gen X were being accused of being the worst parents in the world. A year ago, I did about a year ago or so. And now we're being accused of being the worst grandparents. So that kind of leads me down the path of, are these younger people accepting responsibility for their lives, or are they just blaming their parents? You know what I'm saying? Are they just blaming us because because the world isn't nirvana. It's not this beautiful utopia. So they want to blame their parents, and now they're finding out that raising children is not as easy as they thought it was. So they're still blaming their parents. You know, they're blaming their parents because having kids is a difficult thing, and not understanding that back when they were kids and their parents had kids, their parents were facing the same difficulties they are now. You know what I mean? There's no self-reflection there. There's no self-reliance, no accepting of responsibility for their own actions. It's just a blame game. Blame, blame, blame. Now, having said that, I'll talk about Gen X specifically and myself in particular. But before I go into that, I've got to illustrate the point that we're not talking about all of Gen X. I know there are some Gen Xers out there who are doting grandparents. There are Gen X grandparents out there who are raising their grandkids as if they're their own kids. So this isn't a blanket thing. So anything I say about Gen X is not talking about 100% of Gen Xers. All right. I'm talking about my thoughts and my opinions, and maybe some Gen Xers out there might relate to that, might be able to relate to me. That's it. So before you get all upset and want to shout in all caps that you're raising your grandkids, I get that. That's not. I'm not saying that every single Gen Xer is behaving a certain way. But when we're talking about Generation X, or any generation or any large group of people, we have to make generalities. And this subject is a generality. They were specifically talking about Generation X as a whole. So when I respond to this, then I have to respond in the same language that they did, and not about specific individuals inside Generation X. So I will go on to say that when I personally was a child, I had to babysit my younger brothers and sisters. I was the oldest of four. I had to babysit since I was like 6 or 7 years old, something like that. I mean, very young. I started babysitting my brothers and sisters. I changed diapers and stuff as a young kid. I had to grow up fast. I had to cook for them and all this other stuff at a very young age. And when I grew up and was able to get away from that, it didn't appeal to me to go back and babysit any more kids. You know what I'm saying? I got away from that. I had to do it as a kid, and a lot of things you're forced to do as a child, you don't really want to do as an adult. You just get a bad taste in your mouth over the experience, and it stays with you for years. So I get it where Gen Xers who grew up like me, basically feral and fending for ourselves and helping to raise our younger siblings, I get it where they might not be the most doting and involved grandparents. I get it. That's just that makes sense to me. Number one. Number two, I believe that kids should have freedom. Kids, they should take their lumps and learn life's lessons, because life is not, you're not always going to have doting grandparents and doting parents to hold your hand on the way to the office and protect you from all of the shoo-shooing in the office and all of the politics of corporate life or whatever, all that bullshit. They're not going to be able to shield a person from that for their entire lives. So they might as well grow up young, realizing that life isn't fair. Sometimes life is hard. And I'm not saying in an abusive way, but in a realistic way, at least. I wouldn't raise a child in some bubble and having them believe that that's how life is. Because when they get out into life and they find out that it's different, they're going to be in for a rude awakening. So that kind of bubble wrap, kind of sheltering type of upbringing, raising children that way, I just disagree with that on its face, fundamentally, And it seems to me like this younger generation, they're basically looking for a babysitter. You know what I mean? They don't want to pay for one. So they want their parents they just want somebody to unload their kids on for a few hours while they go running around doing whatever, and Gen X parents are saying, no, I'm not babysitting your kids. Get somebody else to babysit your kids. I've got shit to do too. I just got off work. I'm not in the mood to babysit kids now, whatever it is, and I can totally see Gen X doing that. A Gen Xer would be like, no, it's not going down like that. I'm still busting my ass every day and trying to pay the bills and shit, and I'm not babysitting after work, so you can go out. I can totally see these younger kids acting like that would be a travesty. You know what I mean? Like that would just be a horrible thing to say to them. No, I'm not going to babysit your kids after I've worked all day. That's just, oh my God, how could they do that? That's just horrible. You're not living your life for me. You're not going to wrap your entire life around my whims and wishes, because that fits right in with that shit. You know what I mean? That fits right in with this whole culture they're cultivating there, this online me bullshit. So yeah, I would almost bet my left arm that's more closer to the truth than, Gen Xers just completely abandoning their grandchildren and not wanting to be with them at all or any of this shit like these people are crying about online. And a lot of times that would just be enabling some kind of continued party lifestyle, right? Going out and doing whatever. But you have kids now. You have kids at home. You have responsibilities. You don't get to go out and party till 2 a.m. anymore. You don't get to go out and do things anymore because you have kids. So this kind of accepting of responsibility, that's another part of growing up and becoming an adult. Okay, and that's the problem with the bubble wrap thing. They think that because they were bubble wrapped as kids and protected from all this stuff and allowed to make the world about themselves, they think the world is still about themselves, right? They think that everything's supposed to go their way and the world's supposed to wrap itself around their feelings and all this shit. And that's just not true. And this is an example of that. So now their parents don't want to babysit for them so they can go out and do whatever. So their parents are naturally the worst grandparents ever. And this ties right in with that whole bubble wrap thing. Because kids are now growing up and they're realizing that their parents, although they worked hard and went the extra mile to give them everything and to make sure that they weren't raised the way we were, right? But we're not willing to do that, go that extra mile, to continue to go that extra mile for another 18, 20, 30 years with our grandkids. That's your job now. You go the extra mile. You bend over backwards to bubble wrap or whatever you're going to do. You do it. I did it already. I'm not gonna bubble wrap your kid now in order for you to continue this carefree lifestyle that you've enjoyed for the last 25 years. That's just taking it another step too far, right? They're just claiming another 18 years of a Gen Xer's life, and no, Gen Xers have had enough. And I'm talking about the Gen Xers who bubble wrap their kids, which we did. Some of us did. I wouldn't do it, but I understand that some Gen Xers did. Some Gen Xers, bubble wrap their kids, and they wanted to protect their kids from all the stuff that they went through as children, right? And that's a natural thing for people to do. I don't fault people for doing that, but there's a certain amount of the life that you have to give up in order to do that. And I think that a lot of people who bubble wrap their kids aren't willing to give up another 18, 20 years of their lives to bubble wrap their grandkids. It's time to step back, take a step back. I'm not gonna raise your kids unless I have to. I would, if something happened and I must, by necessity, take my grandkids in and raise them as my own, I would, of course. That's not a question. But when you're healthy and perfectly capable of taking care of your own kids, no, I'm not going to raise them for you. I'm not going to do it. That's just point blank. And again, I must note that that's me and my opinion and my idea. I know everybody's different. There are a lot of different aspects of this and opinions of this throughout Gen X. So I'm not talking about every single Gen Xer. But I have a feeling that there are quite a few of us who feel the same way I do, because we all grew up the same way, We grew up defending for ourselves, and we had to grow up early. I mean, that whole thing about that saying that Gen X was, 30 by the age of 10. Now, I remember my dad's friends saying that about me. That kid, your kid's 10 going on 30. I remember him standing there saying that about me. And I just always thought it was me. I just thought, well, I had to babysit the kid, my brothers and sisters, and to tell you right there, I called them the kids. I got to babysit the kids. And I'm 10 years old, and I'm babysitting the kids, you know what I'm saying? But that kind of thing. And my point was that it wasn't until later in life that I found out that a lot of Gen Xers were 10 going on 30. It wasn't just me. I wasn't the only one who had to grow up fast and was fending for myself and cooking for myself and my siblings at a very young age. And doing that at that young age, it kind of makes you rebel as you get older, right? Because you get free from that. If you let a chicken out of its coop, it's going to fly around and stuff. You know what I'm saying? So there's something to be said for that. And now that we are free of that, once we got free of that, that freedom, that love of freedom, never really left us. Even when we took on responsibilities and had responsibilities thrust on us, we rose to the occasion and accepted them. But once we get that freedom back, we're not really willing and looking forward, right, to giving up that freedom again. That's just the way it is. It's just how things panned out for a lot of us in Generation X. So I understand why a lot of Gen Xers wouldn't want to take on the responsibility of raising a child when the child's parents are fully capable of raising the child themselves. You know what I mean? That's makes perfect sense to me. I completely agree with that. But the whole thing with this online argument deal about Gen X being the worst grandparents ever, because we do refuse to do that, right? Because we aren't willing to raise someone else's children, even our own children's children. Now, that I don't know, that just that rings of just spoiled. That rings of a grown up having children, and the parent is still just spoiled. I want someone else to raise my kids. I want someone else to be more involved with my children. I want someone else to take more responsibility in my children's lives. And having someone do that and just appreciating it is one thing. To demand that of another person, no matter who that person is, to demand that of another person is just wrong. It's twisted somehow, right? You can't demand that anyone else on this planet take a bigger part of a larger chunk of responsibility for your children. It doesn't make sense. And I saw it years and years ago. I saw this thing about YouTube. Someone was in the comments on YouTube talking about, how their kids were watching YouTube videos that they didn't want them to watch, and that YouTube needed to take responsibility and view these videos and make sure that they were child content ready, right? Now, I don't know if you know the statistics, but it's like millions upon millions of hours of footage uploaded to YouTube every day. For them to scan through that to protect your children from the content, back then, now they have AI, so it's a little better, but back then it was just a ridiculous notion for YouTube to try to tackle this, right? But the poster, wanted YouTube to parent their children for them. Heaven forbid that person get up off the couch and walk over and look at their child's screen to make sure that they were consuming appropriate content, right? Heaven forbid that person do that and raise their children, but they wanted YouTube to do it. They wanted YouTube to shield their children because they didn't feel like it was their responsibility. They wanted YouTube to take on that responsibility. And I'll never forget that. Now, YouTube has child protection stuff on here now. They're doing their thing to keep, inappropriate content from children, and I applaud them, whatever. But I just think the responsibility rests on the parents' shoulders, and to shirk that responsibility it's ridiculous. You had a kid. And the kid's your responsibility. What else can I say? I didn't have the kid. Nobody else had the kid. You had the kid. It's not Google's kid. It's not Facebook's kid. It's not TikTok's kid. It's your kid. You don't want the kid watching the shit? Take the phone away from the kid. What could be simpler? You don't want the kid watching certain shit or whatever? Get a phone that's appropriately that you can set, settings on it to where the kid cannot watch inappropriate stuff without your consent. So, I mean, you just have to take responsibility and accept responsibility once you have a child. To expect somebody else to do that is just wrong on so many levels. It's just wrong. So, in my opinion, these parents screaming this shit about Generation X being the worst grandparents ever, these parents need to grow the hell up, accept responsibility, and raise their damn kids. If they want to raise them in a bubble wrap, raise them in a bubble wrap. They want to raise them free range feral like Gen X was, raise them free range feral like Gen X was raised. However you want to do it, you do it. That's not a grandparent's responsibility. A grandparent's responsibility is have the kid over for a couple hours once a week or once a month and spoil the shit out of them. That's what grandparents are for, and impart some damn wisdom. Grandma gives them candy and maybe slips them a $5 bill, and grandpa takes them out in the yard while he's gardening and imparts wisdom and shit. That's what grandparents are for. Not to help you raise them. Not unless you actually need the help. Now, if a parent actually needs the assistance, then grandparents are there to help. So are uncles, aunts, brothers, sisters. That's what family is for. But to expect a grandparent to help you raise your kid just so that you can maintain a free roaming lifestyle like you did when you were single, no, just flat no. And I'll leave you there with that. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, and comment. If you'd like to support the channel by becoming a member, I'll leave that link down in the description, or you can head over to the channel page and become a member that way. If you'd like to support the channel directly, you can do so by clicking on that super thanks button down there. Or you can head over to Buy Me a Coffee and buy me a cup of coffee. I appreciate those of you who do that. Thank you very much. If you're interested in Gen X gear, we got some pretty cool stuff over there at Redbubble. Gen X Thinks and Gen X branded stuff, t-shirts, coffee mugs, stickers, shower mats, all kinds of cool stuff over there. But I'll leave that link down in the description for those of you who are interested. If you can't or don't want to support the channel in any of those ways, you can always do so by sharing these videos on your social media. That helps out one hell of a lot, so thank you very much to those of you who do that. I really do appreciate it. If you have any ideas for future episodes of Gen X Thinks, please put those down in the comments. Or you can email us, and the email is genxthinks@gmail.com. And as always, stay frosty, Gen X, and I'll see you on the next one.